Are new traps coming to Grounded? They very well could be in a future update. So I'm in the new playground mode and I'm building my first map here, which hopefully I will have available for the launch of the update on November 13th. I'm going to try to work through this and get it finished. So if I do that, I will have a video for it with a code for it. So look for that in the next few days. But in the meantime, as I was building this, I was going through the crafting menu and looking for things I could place down to make my map more interesting. And as I was doing so, I stumbled upon some items in here which are currently not available in the game. They're not in creative mode. I did go and check to see if they're in there. They are only currently available in the playground mode. And while there's a possibility they could come to the game, there's no guarantee. The reason I'm thinking there's a possibility they could come to the game is there was discussion by the developers at some point over the past couple months of possibly improving base defenses. With the current update that is coming out, the 1.3 update, they are making base defenses and the waft emitters better in terms of giving you a reason to do them because they will be rewarding raw science. They're still not going to be rewarding like all the bug parts you would normally get, but at least you'll get raw science from them, and you can use raw science for lots of things in the game. But let's go through these traps that I found and discuss how they could possibly be used and how they might be crafted. So first up is going to be the pollen accumulator. Fake flower for easy access to pollen. This looks very similar to the lure trap. In fact, it looks exactly like it. So I would imagine if this ever comes to the game, you'll be making it by using flower petals and sprigs. And what I would imagine this will be used for will be to perhaps attract bees, or maybe it'll just pollen will spawn on top of it over time. You'll be able to use the pollen from this to make Shinobi sneezes or for the pollen turret ammo. So that could be possibly useful as an easy way to find pollen, as pollen's not always the easiest to find, although they have made it a little bit easier by, I believe, the dandelions, when you break them, actually drop pollen now, but it still might be much easier if you could get it by just basically AFKing by putting this trap down. The rest of them look like they're going to be more defensive traps. The first one's going to be the catapult trap. Launch things into the air. Now, I imagine what this would be probably made out of maybe an acorn top as well as a weed stem. That would make the most sense to me, although I guess it could be made out of something else, but that would make the most sense to me. And I guess what would happen is as an enemy walks on top of it, either it is automatically triggered and it just launches them away, or perhaps you have to like press a button or something and activate it to make them fly away. In the new game mode here, the new playground mode, there are buttons and there's ways to have enemies trigger things, so that, or you can actually have things triggered yourself. So that could possibly be something that gets added in the future. And this will be very helpful because if you've not played other tower defense games before, like Orcs Must Die series or Fortnite Save the World, those are the two that come to mind the most. Those games have what are called floor launchers and also wall launchers. And what those do is as an enemy walks into their basically effect range, it'll trigger them and they will throw the enemies back. The reason that's useful is it can basically just delay enemies from attacking, because in those games, well, in Orcs Must Die, you normally have to kill everything. In Fortnite Save the World, you basically, in most of the missions, you just have to last a certain amount of time. So you can forever basically stall the mission. In Grounded, you don't actually have to kill any of the enemies. The raid just ends after a certain amount of time, whether you kill them or not. So it could be useful for that, for stalling. But ideally, what would probably happen would be they come through some defensive traps where you do damage to them, they get catapulted back, and then they have to repeat it. So basically they're getting recycled through the same traps or through you doing damage to them either with your weapons or with turrets. The spike strip is currently in the game, as is the lure trap. I will say real quick on the lure trap, I haven't tested this recently, but I know I was looking back, because I'm going to talk about this in just a second, because I did do a video on traps in the past. The lure trap used to work really well. You would put it down and almost immediately enemies would come to it. I don't know what they did to it, but that doesn't seem to work like that anymore. The last time I tested it, it really didn't attract anything, even when I put it like near enemies. The lure arrow did work, but only when I basically shot it directly at an enemy. The lure trap, you literally could place it down and bugs would come from like all over the yard to it. So maybe they'll fix that in the future. The next one that's newer, the new one here, is going to be the pebblet dumper. Fill with pebblets and then drop them on insects, must be placed on a wall. So I would imagine this would be maybe made out of either a basket, like the clover basket, or perhaps you'd make it out of like acorns, and then you'd have to put pebbles in it. As an enemy walks underneath of it, it will basically dump the pebbles on them and deal damage. This will be like a standard drop trap. Many games have that. Both the games I mentioned, the Orcs Must Die series, as well as Fortnite Save the World, they have drop traps where as an enemy walks underneath of them, the trap drops some type of item on them and it does damage to them. Next up is going to be the Plasmorb, generates lightning. This most likely would make sense if this was like the Tesla coil that is in the assistant manager fight. This actually is in the game right now in terms of you can put this down right now. So you can put down this laser pillar. So I would imagine this will be what it is. You can place this down inside of, actually it might be the shock pillar. The laser pillar shoots lasers. The shock pillar would actually make sense because this is the one that shoots lightning out. So that would make more sense if that was actually the one that would be able to be placed into your survival mode. So what this would do is as an enemy gets close to it, either it automatically triggers as it generate lightning, or maybe there's a switch you flip on and it just starts generate lightning. What would this be made out of? Maybe after you defeat the assistant manager, because that's the fight where it's in, you could possibly unlock a recipe for it. And perhaps you would have to get robot parts or something. It would actually give a reason to fight the robots that are in the game, because they just basically give you raw science and don't drop any resources. But imagine if the Taze Tees, Rust Tees, and the Arcers all dropped like robot parts, and you could actually use those to craft this thing. Or maybe there'd be another way to get metal at some point in the game. But actually, that would actually give a reason to have those enemies actually be able to respawn, so you could go back to those labs and fight them if the robot parts could be used for making this trap. Next is going to be the honey trap. Decreases movement speed. So what this sounds like is you basically put it on the ground, and as an enemy walks over it, it's just going to slow them down. Again, this is a standard trap that's in other games where typically it's usually, I believe, tar, where an enemy will walk through like a tar trap and it'll slow them down. Actually, Orcs Must Die and Fortnite Save the World have the tar trap. They also have spike traps, whereas they walk over as an enemy walks over this floor spikes, it'll slow them down as well. Honey trap, I would imagine, will be made out of honey and maybe like weed stems or something like that, or you just place it on a floor tile. The honey, there's not currently honey in the game. However, there is a honey pot that's sitting on the picnic table, and it would make sense if possibly they made it where we could harvest the honey using maybe like you'd have to have the tier 2 shovel, so maybe you have to have the black ant shovel to be able to harvest the honey. It'd also give a reason to go up there and try to get to the honey pot and actually mess with the bees up there, because right now there's really no reason to go up there and bother those bees. You can kind of just get the stuff that's up there and get out, and you never have a reason to go up there again. Ice trap's going to be the next one, slip and slide. This sounds like another one that would be a floor trap, and an enemy will walk on it, and I guess they would slip and slide back and forth and not be able to attack. Now, of the ones we've gone through so far, this is the only one that I can't think of a way to currently make this, because there is no ice in the game right now. This, of all the ones so far, would seem like the least likely it would possibly be coming in the future. For this to happen, they'd have to add some kind of like ice to the game, which would be like in a cold biome. I know a lot of people have asked for a cold biome. It's been suggested. It's one of the most suggested things, because there's no cold biome in the game. There is a hot biome in the sandbox. There is no cold biome. So they'd have to have add a new biome to the game. They've already basically said that that's probably not going to happen due to memory constraints. So I wouldn't expect that to happen unless they are able to squeeze in like a cooler or something somewhere. Maybe they have a cooler, or maybe they make something, use part of the existing map and just have a small area with ice. I just don't see this one coming into the game, but it would be pretty cool if it did. And then the rest of these, I believe, are actually the tripwire bomb. Used to be in the game. It was removed in favor of the explosive bird trap. The tripwire bomb was actually made out of red amp hearts and I believe brat burst. And what it was will be like a little tripwire. So it'd be a wire that went across, and you would put a brat burst on each side. I think it was 2 brat bursts, 1 on each side. As an enemy walked through, it would explode. Those were actually really expensive to craft, because it was back then when they were in the game, it was kind of a pain to get the red ant eggs, which you need to make the brat burst. It's a little bit easier now because they do respawn pretty quickly, but it would be pretty costly to make these, and because they'd only be a one-time use, they probably wouldn't be worth using. But they've already been in the game before, so there's no reason they couldn't bring them back. Explosive bird traps already in the game. Acorn turrets obviously in the game. Orc destruction bombs obviously in the game, and the splinter traps in the game. Now, of these, I will say that, interestingly enough, I did a video back in September of 2021. I actually went and looked at it, and what went through it was called 7 traps, something like 7 new trap ideas, or 7 traps I'd like to see come to grounded. I'll leave a link for that in the description below in case you're interested in watching it. I'll also leave a link for it at the end of the video, because it is an older video, but I did come up with 7 trap ideas. 3 of them are actually pretty close. In fact, the pebblet dumper, I had a pebblet drop trap, which would be a basket. Basically, it was the clover basket with pebblets in it, and it would sit on a roof, and as an enemy walked over, it would dump on them. In this case, it said it would be placed on a wall, but basically the exact same thing. I also had a sticky trap, which I would suggest would either be made out of bioluminescent gloop from the lightning or the fireflies, or alternatively made out of honey. At the time, obviously, well, still there's no honey in the game, but there was the beehive, and I'm not sure. I think back then there was only the beehive, but they've since added the honey pot, so that would actually make sense. And I also suggested a wall launcher. My wall launcher was pretty rudimentary. You'll probably laugh at the picture of the one I did. I basically had a bounce web attached to a wall that had a weed stem behind it, and it would basically push the enemies away. I think the catapult idea of having the acorn top and just launching them away would actually be better, but it was basically the same thing. Like I said, I'll leave a link for that in the description down below if you're interested in watching it. So those are the traps that I found inside of the playground mode. There are a couple other things I wanted to show real quick, because these were 2 other things. I went through all the menus and only found 2 other things that were not currently in the game. That was going to be the coziness meter, which coziness meter building description, it doesn't really say anything. Obviously, they've added coziness to the game, so there's no meter that is actually like currently visible, or it's not visible at all times. But as you go inside of an area that has the coziness built up from levels 1 to 5, it will show you. This was in the game, as well as the pheromone something. I don't believe it was called the broadcaster. I think it was called something else. They were both in a public test server pre 1.0. In fact, I think it was a couple of, it wasn't the one right before 1.0. I think it might have been the one before that. It was like 3 to 6 months before 1.0. These were both in a public test server in the creative mode, and then they ended up not making it into the game. The pheromone broadcaster, it doesn't even say anything here for it. At the time, I was suggesting that this might be something that either attracted ants or kept ants away, or perhaps was even used to summon in an ant queen. As we know, there's no ant queen in the game, but it's most likely the next boss that's going to be added if another boss is added. Although I will say that the pheromone wouldn't make much sense in that case because all the other bosses currently have a summoning recipe. So it would make more sense if there was a summoning recipe to summon in the ant queen, although this could still be used for something. But the main point of this video was to go through these traps. The reason I'm most interested in these is, and I think there's a possibility they're going to come now, just because they're in the public test server, it doesn't mean they're going to come. In fact, it's not likely they're going to come because I've seen stuff like this before, like those other things, the coziness meter, the pheromone thing. I've seen stuff like that before in previous public test servers, and they never made it in. The fact that they're not in the creative mode right now leads me to believe that these are either left in here by mistake, or maybe they're going to be added in a future update, not the current update. I do have some hope that some of them might be added because, like I said, the developers did talk about improving the base defenses and making them more worthwhile. I can't imagine that just giving raw science for them was the full plan for that. But right now, there's really no reason to do the base defenses. Even with the extra raw science, I don't believe most people are going to do them because being able to defend yourself just with a spike trap, the explosive burrs are kind of expensive to make too. And then the splinter trap here is whatever. I know the turrets have been made better, but they're still not that great. And honestly, I still don't want to do base defenses, even with the improvements to some of these other things. However, if they added in the catapult, the pebblet dumper, the plasma orb, the honey trap, those would be fantastic. I don't expect the ice trap, like I said, but the other three, at least the honey trap, the pebblet dumper, and the catapult could easily be added. The plasma orb, since they already have the one from the assistant manager in the playground mode right now that you can place down, I think that could also logically be added, and maybe you could, like I said, you could unlock it from defeating the assistant manager. If they added all these into the game, it would give more reason to do base defenses for people like me who most enjoy survival games for the base defense aspect of them. The reason I really like the survival games is when I have to build a base and actually defend it. In Grounded, building a base, while you do get the benefit of the coziness factor, in general, you don't really need to build a base. In fact, my full 1.0 playthrough, I built my base on the lily pads, never put a wall up. I did get some coziness from it. Ultimately ended up beating the game without ever really having to build a base. And I never got attacked because I was on the lily pads. Now, you could still get attacked by flying enemies, but as long as you don't bother them, it won't happen. However, if these traps were added to the game, just these traps, not even giving other reason to do the base defenses, like, I don't know, better bug parts, something like that. If literally it was just add these traps into the game, like these 3 or 4, I would be more inclined to want to do the base defenses. I'd have a reason to play the game after I finish the story. Right now, after you finish the story, other than just messing around and building like a base for cosmetic purposes only, what reason is there to play? If they made base defenses more worthwhile by adding these traps, there would be a reason to continue playing after the story. There'd be a reason to play without even doing the story, because if these could be unlocked without having to advance the story, or if they were advanced by playing through the story, either way, it wouldn't matter to me. I would do it, and then I'd be able to play the game essentially as long as I wanted to. I would think of this as like kind of like the 7 Days to Die mode. There's no story in that game, but basically over time, if you haven't played it, every 7 days you get attacked by a horde of zombies. The 14th day is harder than the 7th. The 21st is harder than the 14th, and so on and so forth, all the way up to however many days you want to play. People do 1,000-day raids on 7 Days to Die, and they get crazy numbers of zombies. They have to build all kinds of fancy base defenses and traps and stuff like that, and that's the fun part of the game for them. That would make me want to play Grounded longer, because if I could do base defenses and get progressively harder base defenses, have a way to defend myself where I could basically, if I set it up properly, the traps would just do all the work for me, that would motivate me to want to play. I'd love to make videos on that stuff. I'd stream it. I'd love to do that, and I'd keep playing the game. Right now, I'm going to play the game a little bit, but if this kind of stuff comes, I will be much more likely to play the game more, and I think others will play it as well. Like I said, it will give a reason for people to keep playing. I know not everybody's into base defenses, but at least this will give some long-term thing to do in the game and keep people playing. Whereas right now, there's nothing other than building. So anyway, these are the new traps that are currently in the playground mode. They may or may not be there when the 1.3 update officially releases out of the public test on November 13th. So I just wanted to point these out as something that may come to the game in the future. There's no guarantee. It's probably less than 50-50 they're going to come, but just like I said, they've talked about making base defenses better, and just having some or all of these in the game would definitely do that. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Which of these traps would you most likely to see? If they added these to the game, would you be more inclined to do the base defenses? If not, let me know that too. I know not everybody's into the base defenses, but anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.